tragic and heartbreaking events that unfolded at San Bernardino School yesterday. The events occurred after the briefing, so I just want to make sure I acknowledge that our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families of the 3 victims. We hope for a speedy and full recovery of those who were wounded in the events that occurred. Moving on to today, the President this morning led a discussion with some of the world's top job creators on how private sector thinking can help the government modernize and provide a better, more efficient services to the American people. Together, the companies that were represented in the room this morning employ nearly 4 million people worldwide and at least 1.78 million Americans here in our nation. Starting in small interactive groups, the cabinet members shared their strategic visions for their departments and listened as business leaders offered their unique perspectives on how they might achieve those goals. The groups then came together and shared their discussions and outcomes with the President. The meeting was hosted by the Office of American Innovation and was another opportunity for the administration to engage with the private sector and harness its knowledge to develop innovative solutions to some of our country's biggest problems, like the crumbling infrastructure and broken system at the Veterans Administration. Also this morning, the President completed several procedural steps to ratify the protocol for Montenegro's accession to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, following the Senate's overwhelming and bipartisan vote of advice and consent in support of this ratification. The United States looks forward to formally welcoming Montenegro as the 29th member of the NATO alliance. And later today, the President will have a series of meetings with his national and economic security team. Later, the Attorney General is also at the southwest border to announce specific new actions the Trump administration is taking to secure our borders and keep the country safe. The administration is committed to ending the practice of smuggling gangs and cartels across the border that flood our country with drugs and violence. These actions, which include a strengthening of the laws applying to those who are caught attempting to illegally return to the United States after prior removal, and those who profit off smuggling people across the border, will once again make it clear to the brave men and women of law enforcement that the Trump administration has their back. And Secretary Tillerson finished the G7 foreign ministers meeting today and is now in Moscow for meetings with his Russian counterpart. The visit is part of our effort to maintain direct lines of communication with senior Russian officials and to ensure that the United States' views on the situation in Syria, counterterrorism efforts, North Korea, and other matters are clearly conveyed. We're open to strategic cooperation with Russia when we can achieve a shared goal, such as defeating ISIS, but we'll stand up for our interests and values when we do not see eye to eye. Russia must fully honor the commitments it made on Syria, Ukraine, and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and other topics of international concern. And Secretary Tillerson is going to make that clear during his visit. I also want to make it known that Secretary Mattis and General Votel, who's the COCOM commander of Central Command, will be giving a full briefing on the strike in Syria that occurred today at the Department of Defense at 3:30. Then at 4 o'clock, I'll be back up here for an off-camera briefing with Director Mulvaney of the Office of Management and Budget and OMB Senior Advisor Linda Springer for regarding the President's executive order on reorganizing the executive branch. So that gives us 3 briefings plus this today. Not to get you real excited, but we'll have another one tomorrow morning in advance of the NATO meeting with the Secretary General. This afternoon's briefing will be discussing the plan on reforming the federal government and reducing the size of the federal civilian workforce that OMB was directed to produce by executive order. So we'll be spending a lot of quality time together over the next 24 hours. And with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions. Ken.
Sean, on Russia to start. Does the administration believe that Russia had any advanced knowledge of this chemical attack in Syria? And does the administration believe that Russia may have been complicit in this attack?
I believe there was a background briefing earlier today where that was discussed. At this time, there's no consensus in the intelligence community that that's the case.
Is there any thought within the intelligence community? Are there some strands of the intelligence community?
Again, at this point, the only thing I'm going to say is that there's no consensus within the intelligence community that there was involvement. Annie?
Today, in the background briefing, Trump officials accused Russia of helping Syria cover up Assad's use of chemical weapons. In the past, Trump has praised Putin, calling him very smart and expressing his general admiration. Does he still think Putin is very smart? And does this change the relationship between the two leaders?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, I think the president's made it clear from the beginning that that he entered office thinking that if he can get a deal with Russia in our national interest, which I discussed during the opening remarks as part of Secretary Tillerson's conversation with Foreign Minister Lavrov, then we're going to do it. But if we can't get a deal and if we can't find an area of national interest, then we won't. And in this particular case, it's no question that Russia is isolated. They have aligned themselves with North Korea, Syria, Iran. That's not exactly a group of countries that you're looking to hang out with. With the exception of Russia, they are all failed states. There is clearly, and Russia is not an island when it comes to its support of Syria or its lack of, frankly, acknowledgement of what happened. The facts are on our side. The actions of Syria are reprehensible. And I think that Russia has been party to several international agreements that Syria is not holding up to. In fact, that Russia needs to hold themselves up to. So I think the president has been very clear with his stance on Russia. And in this particular case, we're going to be very forceful, and I think, as will Secretary Tillerson during his visit, to make sure that we let Russia know that they need to live up to the obligations that it has made. Caitlin.
The administration has said sanctions against Syria are forthcoming. What will those look like, and when can we expect them?
Great question. I think you know well enough at this point that we're not going to announce any of that kind of action until it's ready to go. I think the president's made it clear that additional action with respect to Syria in terms of its failure to stop engaging in actions that harm its people will result in action. And so I'm not going to get ahead of what he is planning to announce or when, but as he has made clear on a variety of circumstances, he's not one to telegraph his actions until he's ready to make those announcements.
Secondly, has the administration identified an opposition party that could come to power in Syria if there is a regime change?
I think first and foremost, and I stated this yesterday and will state it again, that our number one goal is to defeat ISIS. That is unequivocally the number one thing. I think secondly, the political conditions that exist in Syria right now are such that what we need Russia and others to do is to help create a political environment in which the Syrian people can choose a leader that is more suited to them. I think getting into who that should be, I think what we're trying to do right now is shape the environment to allow the Syrian people to determine their outcome. Blake.
I'm going to change the topic into totally topics of that. Mark Meadows said earlier this morning that he thinks, quote, we're very close as it relates to health care, and that two options were given to the House Speaker. Does the White House believe that you're very close on health care, and have you signed off on those two options?
Well, two things. One, I think we're getting closer and closer every day. This has been a process that, as you know, the Chief of Staff, the Vice President, and others have been extremely engaged in behind the scenes. We clearly are getting closer. More votes are moving in our direction. And these ideas, I think, are very helpful, and the conversations are getting closer. I don't want to prejudge the outcome at this point, but I would say that we feel very buoyed by the direction that this is going and some of the outcomes. I know that with respect to a couple of the proposals that Congressman Meadows is suggesting, and part of those has to be, again, figuring out whether or not those attract additional votes and gain additional support and don't detract. And I know it sounds very simple, but that's what this entire process has been about. And so he is reviewing a couple of the provisions that he wants to make an amendment or to the ongoing amendment.
Have you signed off to those two?
It's not a question of us signing off. I think we're good with the direction that this is going, as long as it continues to grow the vote. A lot of these provisions that are being discussed give states the flexibility to enact certain provisions, which is consistent with our general philosophy of giving more competition and more choice to the people in the states. So,
secondly, video that's being played across television, United Airlines. Do you think the government should investigate them, the industry as a whole, as it relates to passenger treatment?
I would just say that I think there has been clearly law enforcement is reviewing that situation. I think there's plenty of law enforcement to review a situation like that. And I know United Airlines has stated that they are currently reviewing their own policies. Let's not get ahead of where that review goes. It was an unfortunate incident. Clearly, when you watch the video, it is troubling to see how that was handled. But I'm not going to, they have clearly stated their desire to review the situation. Law enforcement's reviewing it, and I think for us to start to get in front of what should be a very simple, a local matter, not necessarily needing a federal response. Hallie?
2 questions, just to follow up on Blake, just very briefly. Has the president seen that video?
I'm sure he has.
And what's his reaction?
I don't think anyone looks at that video and isn't a little disturbed that another human being is treated that way. But again, I think one of the things that people have to understand is that when there is a potential law enforcement matter for the president to weigh in pro or con would prejudice a potential outcome. So I don't want to get in, but I think clearly watching another human being drag down an aisle, watching blood come from their face after hitting an armrest and whatever, I don't think there's a circumstance that you can sit back and say this probably could have been handled a little bit better when you're talking about another human being. But I don't think that it is my place to get in the middle of judging how a company dealt with this. I think there's clearly going to be enough review, both on a corporate side and then on a law enforcement side, on how this was handled. But I think from a human-to-human standpoint, to watch a human being get dragged down an aisle with their head banging off armrests and not think that it could have been handled better, I would assume that we could probably all agree on that. John?
My 2 questions, though. That was actually just the clarification. First, on both foreign policy, one on Syria. This administration is continuing to fight for its travel ban that would in part limit refugees coming in from Syria. The president spoke very starkly about how affected he was by some of the images that he's seen of these youngest victims. There have also been images of refugees, like, for example, Island Kurdi, that have also been heart-wrenching for people. Is the president giving any thought to reconsidering that aspect of his travel ban?
In terms of letting them in? Well, I think you've heard a lot of these refugees in particular talk about the fact they're not looking to flee. They want.
And I
think the number one goal of this president is to make sure that we protect our people, our country, and to keep those people from having to flee. They have family there. And so that's our number one goal, is to creating a safer environment, de-escalating the conflict there. Is not to figure out how many people we can fly out. I think the U.S. has been extremely supportive when it comes to the financial piece of this, and looking for ways to work with in a diplomatic fashion. But the goal isn't to figure out how many people we can just import to this country. I think there's clearly a security concern that we have to be.
Also?
They have touched him, and I think that's what he made very clear. That's why, with the consent and guidance of his national security team, it was very extreme. It was moving. Going back, I don't mean to make 2 examples of this, but I don't think you can watch those things. Not that you should have any human being, but when you see in particular young children and babies being gassed, it should move any human being that has a heart. So I think, but that partially dealt with why he acted so decisively, is to see an individual in Assad, in that regime, act in a way that reacted to, we can't condemn every act, but I think to literally see someone use gas, and it was pointed out, you think about that, it is in the same category as nuclear weapons for a reason. It is that lethal, it is that deadly, it is that horrific, that when you recognize that use of chemical weapons is put in the same category of weapons of mass destruction as so many other things because of what it does to an individual, and the nature of an attack like that even first responders, if you saw some of the tape, were getting grossly affected by this. It moved him tremendously, and that's part of the reason he acted the way he did.
On North Korea, Sean, I also know that you've seen the latest provocations from Pyongyang. The president tweeted this morning that if China won't help, the U.S. will solve the problem.
That's right.
What does he mean by that, solve the problem?
Right. I think he has been very clear that he will not tolerate some of this action by North Korea. But he's also, to answer your question, I think I've said this before on a variety of topics. The president is not one who's going to go out there and telegraph his response. I think he keeps all options on the table. He keeps his cards close to the vest. And as he showed last week with respect to Syria, when the president is willing to act, it's going to be decisive and proportional to make it very clear what the position of the United States is. That's not what I said. I just said that, as you know, when the president's ready to act, he makes it very clear. And I think there's no question that when the president is ready to make a statement, he will do that. But I think He has made it clear with respect to North Korea that their behavior and their actions with respect to the missile launches is not tolerable. The last thing we want to see is a nuclear North Korea that threatens the coast of the United States, or for that matter, any other country and any other set of human beings. So we need stability in that region, and I think he has put them clearly on notice. John.
Thanks so much, Sean. The alliance between Russia and Syria is a strong one. It goes back decades. President Putin has supplied personnel, supplied military equipment to the Assad government. What makes you think that at this point he's going to pull back in his support for President Assad and for the Syrian government right now?
I think a couple things. You look, we didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You had someone as despicable as Hitler who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons. So you have to, if you're Russia, ask yourself, is this a country that you and a regime that you want to align yourself with? You have previously signed on to international agreements rightfully acknowledging that the use of chemical weapons should be out of bounds by every country. To not stand up to not only Assad, but your own word should be troubling. Russia put their name on the line. So it's not a question of how long that alliance has lasted, but at what point do they recognize that they are now getting on the wrong side of history in a really bad way really quickly? And again, look at the countries that are standing with them. Iran, Syria, North Korea. This is not a team you want to be on. And I think that Russia has to recognize that while they may have had an alliance for them, that the lines that have been crossed are ones that no country should ever want to see another country cross. Yeah.
Two seasonally related questions. First one, coming up on tax day. When does the White House plan on releasing President Trump's 2016 returns? And are there any concerns about possible conflicts of interest reflecting on the tax debate that could be cleared up with this release? Second, how many people are you expecting for the Easter egg roll? And will you be reprising your previous role in this fund?
Those are two tough ones. So on the first one, I think we've asked and answered that several times, and the president's been under audit. I think when you look at, we filed our financial disclosure forms the other day in a way that allows everyone to understand, and for those listening at home, a tax return clearly lists how much money you made, how much tax you paid. When you look at a financial disclosure form, it lists every asset, every debt you owe, where you're getting your money from, where your income's derived from. It is a much more comprehensive understanding. I think the president, this question has been asked and answered over and over again. I think the American people are, frankly, the middle class in particular, and companies that are trying to grow here in the United States are much more concerned about tax reform and allowing our economy to grow and their bottom line to grow. With respect to the Easter egg roll, it's a huge topic. I appreciate that. I think we're going to have an excellent time. Oh, come on. You can't ask the question and not get the answer. But we have worked really well. I think we're going to have a very, very enjoyable day on Monday. The tickets have been sent out to all the schools in the area. There'll be a large military contingent that will be participating as well. And I think there's 5 waves over 2-hour periods in which children and their families will be able to come to the White House. We've done extensive community outreach to really bring a lot of the school children and from the area in, and it's going to be a great day. I don't have the number. I'd be glad. I think the East Wing could probably get you an answer, and I'll make sure I put out that number. I think they're working on the final numbers. They're starting ticket distribution, so I should be able to get you a number on that. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. You said last month that the White House was reviewing the policy on visitor logs.
Right.
Will the White House voluntarily release those visitor logs?
I think we should have an answer on our policy very shortly on that.
Okay, and then a question on Syria. Secretary Tillerson said this morning that it was the United States' hope that Bashar al-Assad will not be part of Syria's future, but it's up to the people of Syria to make that determination. At the same time, the question is now whether it's the White House's position that Assad's a bad actor and it would be ideal if he would go, or whether the White House thinks that the atrocities that he's committed are absolutely unacceptable and he must go, period.
As I mentioned yesterday, I don't see a peaceful, stable Syria in the future that has Assad in charge.
So he absolutely has to go,
I
period.
think there's no question that you can't have a peaceful Syria with Assad in charge. I don't see how that ever works. So, no, I don't see a future Syria that has Assad al-Bashar as the leader of that government. Kristen.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to ask you about some comments that Eric Trump said, speaking of Ivanka Trump, Ivanka is a mother of 3 kids, and she has influence. I'm sure she said, listen, this is horrible stuff. My father will act in times like that. Did Ivanka Trump play a role in President Trump deciding to strike Syria, and if so, what was that role?
Well, the president, I think we released last Friday a very comprehensive TikTok of, when the president was informed by his national security team and how his thinking evolved. 10:30 last Tuesday, his national security team was giving him his presidential daily briefing. They went over what had gone on in Syria in detail. He began to ask a series of questions. They came back to him later that day. There was a deputy principals meeting later on Tuesday. On Wednesday, there was a principals meeting. They continued to bring back with him a series of questions and responses to his thing, and it is evolving. His decision-making process continued aboard Air Force One on the way down to Florida. 4 o'clock when he arrived in Mar-a-Lago, he had a national security team meeting both in Mar-a-Lago and secure VTC back to different elements that were gathered in secure locations. That's when he gave the order. That being said, there's no question that Ivanka and others weighed into him, as it was asked earlier, Hallie asked it, that when he himself saw images, he was very, very moved. And I think Ivanka and others, frankly, I don't think that there's many humans that came into contact with the president during that window of time that said, did you see those images on television? So I don't, I think there was a widespread acknowledgement that the images and the actions that have been taken were horrific and required action.
And just to be clear, she was among those who supported taking action.
I have not asked her what her person, but I think, and again, I saw the reports that Eric gave, but again, I don't think Ivanka stands any different than anyone else when it comes to the response that we got.
Do you know if they discussed the attack?
I don't.
She responded and gave her personal reaction to it?
I don't know, but again, I don't think it's that dissimilar to what any human being probably would have asked.
Just a couple of others. He also said if there was anything that the strike on Syria did, it was to validate the fact that there is no Russia tie, which raises the question that there was some type of political component to this. Can you respond to that?
In the sense that I guess my point, or I think his point would be, after 80 plus days of constantly being asked what the involvement is, I think clearly with us acting, not having a conversation with Moscow in the political sense. Prior to that, I think it pretty is, for all of the discussion about how many ties and back channels and this and that, it was a pretty clear show of resolve and force that the United States was acting and not with anyone else's.
He wasn't suggesting that was a factor in the decision.
No, I think but I think that, respectfully, I mean, almost every single day we've been asked about these so-called ties and back channels and whatever, and I think there is an acknowledgement at some point that if that was true, you would have seen some kind of action that clearly didn't happen.
And just to follow up on the North Korea question,
Yeah.
Hallie read the president's tweet. North Korea seemed to threaten the possibility of taking some type of nuclear action if the U.S. launches another, what they see as another provocation. What is the specific reaction to that? Is the president?
I don't think. I mean, I think that there's no evidence that North Korea has that capability at this time. So I don't know that could happen. That being,
to them making that threat.
well, I don't think that threatening something that you don't have the capability of isn't really a threat. Kevin.
Thank you, Sean. I want to sort of follow up on that. The president in his tweet noted that China could certainly help on the North Korean issue. And when you unpack it through that lens and the fact that the USS Carl Vinson sort of steaming up toward the Sea of Japan, that may be an additional pressure to maybe get China to come to the table. Is that an accurate read of what the president would like to see them do to really apply the pressure on Pyongyang?
Well, I think the president and President Xi discussed this last week in Florida. China has had a very economic and political influence on North Korea over the years, and I think that when it comes to a shared national interest of ensuring that Korea doesn't obtain the nuclear capabilities to threaten any people, that is something that we should all agree upon, and something that he talked about with President Xi as an area of shared national interest. And I think that North Korea clearly understands where the United States stands on this, and I think he would welcome President Xi weighing in on this a little bit more. So I think that's, obviously wants to make it very clear to them and the rest of the country and the rest of the world what our position is.
Putting that strike carrier group in the Sea of Japan, in that region, is that also a messaging circumstance, or is that simply protective for our allies in Japan and Korea?
When a carrier group is several things. The forward deployment is deterrence, presence. It's prudent, but it does a lot of things. It ensures we have the strategic capabilities, and it gives the president options in the region. But I think when you see a carrier group steaming into an area like that, the forward presence of that is clearly, through almost every instance, a huge deterrence. So I think it serves multiple capabilities.
Last one, if I might, on infrastructure and taxes. The CEO is obviously very interested in trying to get something done as quickly as possible. Shovel-ready opportunities for people to get to work, and obviously a lowering of the taxes to enhance business expansion and perhaps even lower for middle-class Americans. But I'm wondering if there isn't a healthcare component that needs to happen before you can move forward on that.
So there's a few things. Obviously, getting health care, the repeal and replace done, would open the amount of money that we can use through the reconciliation process to have available to tax reform. That's why we made it very clear from the beginning that we thought health care should go first. It gives us a greater amount of resources to dedicate to tax reform. That being said, there's under every circumstance, you're talking months of getting tax reform done. That's one area that they discussed today. But one of the more important areas, and where I think you're seeing the president act continuously and decisively, is on the regulatory front. And that's one of the largest burdens that manufacturers, unions, entrepreneurs talk to the president about over and over again, is these stifling regulations of a variety of sort that prevent them. The coal industry, the manufacturing sector, the auto sector, over and over again are talking about the regulatory and the president's ability to take immediate action. I've mentioned it here before, but I mean, so far under the Congressional Review Act, this president signed 12 pieces of legislation. That compares to one that was signed in every administration prior to this year, total. And I think that shows the president's commitment to creating not just a better tax climate, which is going to take a few months, but an immediate regulatory impact that can help businesses break down the barriers, compete more, bring more jobs back to the United States. Cecilia.
Thanks. I just want to give you the opportunity to clarify something you said that seems to be gaining some traction right now. Quote, Hitler didn't even sink to the level of using chemical weapons. What did you mean by that?
I think when you come to sarin gas, he was not using the gas on his own people the same way that Assad is doing. I mean, there was clearly. I understand your point. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. There was not in the. He brought him into to the Holocaust Center. I understand that, but I'm saying in the way that Assad used them, where he went into towns, dropped them down to innocent into the middle of towns. It was brought. So the use of it. And I appreciate the clarification there. That was not the intent.
Okay. Did the president speak with Secretary Tillerson before he went on this trip to Russia? And is this stern message that the secretary delivered today a direct message from the president to Vladimir Putin?
I'm sure, yeah, I mean, they spoke. He was in Florida with him before he left, and they met Tillerson and the president after his meeting with President Xi concluded, and they've talked, I think, since then as well.
So this message, these pretty stark, harsh words from the Secretary Tillerson this morning about Russia, can that be interpreted
I don't know.
as a message from the president?
Look, I'm not going to.
Russia?
I don't know the nature of their final conversations, and I know there's been some evolution of the intelligence that we have and the actions that have been taken since Friday. So I don't know where the conversations have laid off, but I think Secretary Tillerson clearly speaks on behalf of the United States in the president's position. John.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. Two foreign policy related questions. You're speaking about Secretary Tillerson's trip, and I'd like to do a follow-up on the question I asked 2 weeks ago. Is he scheduled to meet with Mr. Navalny or Mr. Khodorkovsky or any of the civil society representatives outside of government?
I'll refer you back to State Department the same way I did 2 weeks ago. I think they are in charge of his schedule So I think it's best to look at the State Department.
And has the president or anyone in the administration been in touch with President Erdogan on all of the actions in Syria?
I do believe that someone, either the Vice President or the Secretary of Defense, spoke with him last week, but I'd have to check. I know there was a series of foreign leader and head of government calls to both Defense Minister and heads of state, but I'd have to check. I thought he was on that list, but off the top of my head, I cannot recall. Major.
You said at the top that you hope that Secretary Tillerson would be able to clearly convey to the Russians the sentiments of the U.S. government. Is that enhanced by a meeting directly with the Secretary and President Putin? And if there is no meeting like that, would the President of the United States consider his Secretary of State snubbed by the Russian President?
Well, obviously, he's going to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov. That's his counterpart. I think that's the job of a Foreign Minister and a Secretary of State, to meet with each other. They're the counterparts. And I think that if he didn't meet with President Putin, that he can convey his sentiments and thoughts of the United States to the Foreign Minister.
Would the history of Putin meeting with Kerry and previous Secretaries of State influence the President's judgment on that?
We'll have to see. I'm not going to, I mean, we're not there yet. So I think to prejudge the outcome of the visit.
Essential for the President, in other words, for Tillerson to see Putin on this visit, even though there are
No,
very
but I would
specific
say
things
that
you want to convey to the
No, but I
Russian
would say
government.
that there's a bit of irony that for all of these talks that have been perpetuated about back channels and direct links, that now it's, well, they won't meet with you, and does that undermine the relationship that I've heard time and time again? No, I understand that, but I think that it's interesting that we went from all of these direct links to Russia to now, are we disappointed that we can't even get a meeting with them? There's a bit of irony in your question.
I don't know. I don't even understand your point.
They-
I'm
they-
asking you, at a time after the United States has called out Russia for a
Right.
disinformation campaign in Syria, for collusion with a government it regards as carrying out a war crime, meeting with the Russian president, is it or is it not a priority for this president to have his Secretary of State convey that directly to the
He
head
is
of the Russian
conveying that
government?
message, and that's what he's
The head of
doing.
the Russian government.
But
That's all I'm
if the head of the Russian government won't meet with him, then he's going to convey it to his counterpart.
And I'm asking you if that...
And I just said we're not there yet, but I think right now,
not consider that a snub.
no, I think the answer is that he's meeting with his counterpart. That's the appropriate person for him to convey that with, and we'll have to wait and see how the meeting goes. Steve.
The Russian president today said that all this talk from the White House about weapons of mass destruction reminds him of what he heard from the White House in 2003. This White House is expressing confidence that sarin gas was used. What do you say to skeptics in Moscow and maybe in other countries, perhaps here at home, who doubt that level of confidence?
I think there was a 45-minute briefing with members of the national security team prior to this, which they walked through all of that level of confidence that they have. I think that anybody who doubts that, in terms of the pictures that were shown and the media that was there, wouldn't just be doubting the intelligence, but it would be doubting the entire international reporting crew that was there to document all of this. There have been doctors, intelligence communities, media. I mean, I don't think it takes mere eyeballs to recognize what's happening and happen throughout there. So it's not a question of doubting us, it's doubting everybody but Iran, Syria, North Korea, Russia.
And one other historical villain who used chemical weapons against his own people was Saddam Hussein. It was the policy of the United States government there should be regime change in Iraq as a result of that and other things. Why shouldn't it be the same policy towards Bashar al-Assad?
I think that you're trying to act as if, or the premise of the question suggests that we don't want a new leader. I think I've stated now 2 days in a row that we don't see any a peaceful or stable Syria in the future that has Assad as the head of it. Their number one priority right now for us as a government is to make sure that we stop the threat of ISIS and bring stability to that region. But make no question about it, there is no peaceful and stable Syria in the future that Assad is the head of. That's it, point blank.
So I just want to clarify, is the U.S. position as far as cooperation with Russia that Russia must admit or agree that Syria was behind the chemical attack, and then also that Russia must disown Assad? Like, can cooperation happen if Russia maintains its position that Syria was not behind that chemical attack?
It's not just behind it. I think that Russia has joined an international agreement regarding the not just the use, the possession of. It was Susan Rice who went out and said that Syria no longer had access to chemical weapons. We know that's not true. I think that the United States, Russia, and others signed an international agreement that Syria was part of that said that they would not only use but possess chemical weapons. The first thing that we need to do is make sure that we enforce the existing agreement that Russia is a partner to. That's first and foremost. And I think we need to make sure that we do that because it is in the national interest of the United States to make sure that the proliferation of chemical weapons spreads no further. And that is something that we've got to be very careful. It's not just the deterrence of future use within those people, but also the proliferation of them throughout the world.
But at this point, Russia's not even agreeing with the U.S. contention that the Syrian government carried out the attack. So
I understand that, and I think that Secretary Tillerson has just landed a few hours ago, and I think we'll have an opportunity to talk to them. But again, you've got to. This is not. I don't. You know, as I just mentioned to Steve a second ago, I mean, you realize that Russia isn't an island on this. They are not. This is not some big split as to how this actually happened. The only countries that aren't supporting the U.S.'s position are Syria, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. This is not exactly, you know, a happy time cocktail party of people that you want to be associated with. They are failed states with the exception of Russia. So these individual states, this is when Russia is saying that they don't agree with us, they are not siding with other nations of stature. They are agreeing with failed states, and a small number of those as it stands. I think they are staring in the defiance, or they are defiant in the worldview that doctors, intelligence agencies, reporters, civilians, international experts have all looked at and come to the same conclusion except for them. I don't think there's any other outcome than that. With that, guys, I'll see you back in a little bit. I know we're going to have one more out of our three. Thank you.
Joining the Astana talks.
Welcome back. That was the Sean Spicer press briefing from the White House Live. This is the post show of the press briefing. I wanted to update you quickly on a breaking news story that I've just been doing a little research on, which just came out a few minutes ago. So apparently there was a small explosion or small explosions near a bus that was carrying this German soccer team called Borussia Dortmund. And they were on their way to a Champions League match. And the Champions League match it's a very, very important big tournament in Europe, a soccer tournament. They have it once a year. I mean, like the final of the Champions League tournament is like the Super Bowl. Like it's that big. It's like one of the biggest sports events in Europe. And this was a match in the tournament. And this explosion or small explosions occurred next to the bus of this German team that was going to play in this match. And I saw several reports saying there was one person hurt. It was one of the people on the team, and he was taken to the hospital. And this is all coming out right now. And I've also seen that they're not going to play the match at the scheduled time. And I don't know if they're going to reschedule the match for today, later, or something like that. But the point is this. Now we have no idea, this could be maybe there was a problem with the bus or a problem with the car nearby and it was an accident or something. If it turns out this is some sort of terrorist attack, though, it's very worrying because, we haven't seen like sports teams targeted in terms of terrorist attack, but that is when you think about it, it's a soft target that's very important and makes a big statement and is definitely going to be less protected than, say, a government official would be. So it's a worrying, if it is a terrorist attack, it's worrying that's a strategy that they might turn to. And now I will say, in the France attack a couple years ago, the one where, there was that nightclub and like over 100 people were killed at a nightclub. That attack started with a couple of bombings outside a soccer match. It was not inside the soccer match, it was outside the soccer match. Maybe there was speculation on whether the people were going to actually try to get in and they couldn't get in. So targeting soccer is something that's been done before in Europe with terrorist attacks. But this is the scary thing of like picking the team. Because think of when these teams travel, I mean, they don't have like, armored vehicles around them at all times, and it's a very high-profile target, very high profile, and probably, if you know where they're going and when they're going, less security than other high-profile targets would be. So we'll keep an eye on this story, but it's the kind of thing where I don't even know if we'll even get covered in America just because it's a soccer team and only one person were hurt. But I'm now seeing. B&O News has reported this. They reported that 3 small explosions occurred near a bus carrying this team in Germany, and again, 1 hurt. And so I had read reports saying the 1 person hurt was a person on the team. So I'm guessing this is the kind of thing where if you were in Europe right now, this would be gigantic news. It'd be like, imagine, if a soccer team, if a football team here was heading toward a playoff game and some explosion occurred next to the bus and one of the players got hurt, that would be a gigantic story here. But I don't even know if it's really going to be covered much here. So anyways, wanted to update you on that. I'll keep an eye on it, let you know if we hear anything on it, but that's happening. Back to the press brief. Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and go on the mic to say this, but I would just like to point out CNN's main headline right now and how absurd it is. It is, quote, Spicer, even Hitler didn't use chemical weapons. And the sub-third text says, later clarifies he didn't use them, quote, in the same way, bombing towns.
So I feel like this is a comment, and thank you, Jake, for pointing it out. So a comment that people have been already tweeting a lot about and talking about on social media is, there was a point at which Sean Spicer, I'm just getting my notes up here. Sean Spicer was talking about, Syria and chemical weapons and Assad. And at one point he said, I wrote it down. I wrote notes down. Where is it here? Hold on as I go through my notes. Hitler didn't even sink to the level of using chemical weapons. So he was talking about what, I think the question was something like, what's so bad about chemical weapons? What makes them worse than other kinds of weapons, that weren't a military attack? And he was saying what makes them worse. And he said that even Hitler didn't use them as a way to try to say, this is how bad they are, that even Hitler didn't use them. But, Hitler is it's like a loaded word to use, a loaded name to use. And if you're going to as soon as you make a Hitler comment, you're going to get a lot of publicity about it. People on different sides will say different things about it. And I guess Jake was pointing out that CNN is really focusing on that comment now. But, and I guess later, he clarified his remark later because somebody pointed out to him that Hitler used gas in World War II, obviously, when he gassed, innocent people, including millions of Jewish people. And but what he said, Spicer said, is he was not using the gas on his own people the same way that Assad is doing. And also, I saw somebody tweet out something about how they believed Hitler didn't use gas in the war because he was gassed as a soldier in World War I or something. I don't know about the truth of that claim, but I heard somebody make it. Anyways, I don't know how much the media is going to be focusing on this in the coming hour or so, but maybe they'll jump all over it and try to criticize him about this. But I guess it sort of shows that once you say Hitler anything, you're going to raise a lot of uproar. Now, there isn't a bit of an issue where, when he said Hitler didn't even use chemical weapons, I don't think he was trying to say that Assad is worse than Hitler, but it can read that way to some people. So I'm sure cable news networks are very happy now because they can spend the next day talking about Hitler and as Jake said, putting up headlines about it, even though it was not a big part of the press conference. It was one thing he said. Maybe you guys have some thoughts on this. If you'd like to, feel free to write in or call in during the post show. Let us know what you thought about it, about any of the issues that were talked about, or anything else going on in the news today. You can call us at 202-470-0049. You can write to me on Twitter at Lookner, direct message me at LOOKNER, or you can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Let me just see here. I wrote some other notes down about, let me just see if you sent some messages in. All right, so America First writes in, huge mistake for Spicer to compare Assad to Hitler. The media is going to have a field day with that. Yeah, America First, I think you have a point in that. I don't think he wasn't trying to say Assad is worse than Hitler. I think his point was to try to say try to illustrate how bad chemical weapons are. But in doing so, he said something which could be read as saying Assad is worse than Hitler. And now, like you said, it gives the media, media is on 24 hours a day. They're looking for stuff to talk about that's going to bring viewers in. They will jump all over this. And as Jake already pointed out, CNN had it as their big headline. So, probably now that might be considered a mistake by Spicer in the sense of generally, I think when you're a government official or you're like just some kind of public figure, a good rule is to avoid comments involving the name Hitler because they can frequently get you in trouble and they end up being controversial and it's like, they're hot button comments. So I'm sort of surprised he said that because you would think he would avoid using that name when he could. And it seems like he could have made I don't know, maybe it might have just been something he thought of all of a sudden and just said it and then realized after, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Or maybe he thinks he should have said it. Anyways. Andrew Sova says, won't they discuss Rex Tillerson's visit? Oh, no, you said, earlier in the pre-show, you said you look tired. How are you with my sleeping schedule? My sleeping schedule is fine, Andrew. My sleeping schedule is fine. I have these little things throughout the day where once in a while I yawn or something. I'll get tired for 5 minutes at a time, and then later I'll be totally good. So, what can you do? Let's see. C.J. Lane wrote in, Spicer said it well to major of irony to his reference that Secretary of Tillerson is not meeting Putin like Kerry did. C.J. Lane, I think you're referring to something specifically, and if I knew it, I think I'm not totally understanding your tweet because I'm not getting exactly what you're referring to. So if you want to write it in, I'd love to hear you say a little more, clarify your tweet a bit, and I'd be happy to read it. But I can't tell exactly from what you wrote which part of the briefing you're referring to. Sorry, CJ. CJ says, I think this is in reference, CJ Lane, you say in reference to the Hitler thing, you say it was a loaded question. White House press pool constantly sets up press secretary in a nasty way. Sean always does a good job. Nasty press. So you feel like the press is being nasty constantly to Sean Spicer, and you think with the Hitler thing, the question he was asked, you say was loaded. Thank you for CJ for writing in. I feel like I didn't hear the exact question that was asked. I'm doing a bunch of stuff out there, and I don't hear all of the words said in the press briefing, and I was also kind of following this soccer breaking news explosion story, so I didn't hear the exact question on that. And just to remind you, when I said soccer breaking news, a big, well-known soccer team in Germany had an explosion go off, small explosion or explosions go off next to their bus today on their way to a big game. It's in the Champions League tournament, which is a big tournament. And I saw reports that one player on the team was hurt and had to go to the hospital. That's not confirmed yet. We'll let you know when we get more in. But seems like an important story. Let's see. Again, hold on. This is another comment I want to get to. America First says, I like Spicer, but I think it's time for him to be replaced. He's caused a lot of unnecessary controversy. So you, America First, think he should be replaced even though you like him. So now I will say, let me play devil's advocate here. Somebody might say, well, you're going to cause controversy as press secretary. It kind of comes with a job because you're always being asked these questions and the press is ready to jump on you. But somebody else might argue, well, he just shouldn't have said the Hitler thing. That's just, you should know not to mention Hitler because then it'll just be controversial no matter what you say. So America First, appreciate you writing in. If you would like to write in or call in during this post show, we'd love to hear from you what you thought about the press briefing. Oh, we have somebody on the line. John, hello. How are you doing? Where are you calling from today?
Hey, Steve, I'm calling from California. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. Where in California, John? Can I ask? I came here from LA. What part of the state?
Oh, yeah, I'm in Orange County.
Very nice. John, so what did you want to talk about on the show today?
So, I'm sorry, it's not related to the press conference, but I just wanted to throw out there that I'm highly disappointed in the president for his inability to do anything on the H-1Bs. I mean, this was a huge issue for all of us. Look at it like 85,000 H-1Bs that he allowed in last week as of Monday. Those 85,000, that's the equivalent of 160 carrier air conditioning factories all leaving the country. Then you include the wives of the H-1Bs, figure that's another 40,000. And that's a lot of jobs he just lost, and he did nothing.
And this issue, it's been a while since I was reading about H-1B stuff, but if I can remember right, I know there's an issue with potentially these visas being used to replace American workers. And something else...
Steve, that's exactly what's happening. Steve, I manage a system for, I don't know if I should say, but I manage a big IT system for...
You don't have to say if you don't want to, so...
Well, it's Medicare.
Okay.
And I watched them, they marched out 3 Marine veterans. Marched them out the door and replaced them with 3 H-1Bs. And these were, I'm sorry, but these were project managers, and there's nothing special technically that's coming from India that these guys couldn't have done. In fact, again, these were Iraq War veterans, marched out. Unbelievable. And it's all to replace us with a $65,000 body. And this is a U.S. government system.
And I need to read, John, again. Maybe you know more about this. And I remember reading a few weeks ago a couple articles about this. How, let me see if I'm getting this right. I believe with the H-1B system, what's happened is there are a couple companies, I believe in India, which is like these are given by a lottery, these visas. But these companies, like there's just a couple companies that apply like way more. They flood the system with applications. So like an inordinate number of these visas go to these staffing companies that are just bringing in people here to replace Americans, and that, in theory, is not the way the system is supposed to be used. I got to read up on this stuff again to get more of the exact details right, but that's my understanding of what these articles said. Are you familiar with any of this stuff? It's okay if you're not.
Oh, Steve, I'm too familiar with the H-1B.
Okay.
I'm too familiar with it. So you have it pretty much right. It's like 3 or 4 Indian companies, Infosys, Tata, and HCL and some others. But they're not doing anything illegal.
Right.
They're not gay. They're just playing by the rules and killing us.
Right.
And so when Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, says, "Hey, we'll set up this phone so you can call with abuse," the whole thing is abusive. They're not doing any. They didn't do anything to stop it. I'm really upset about this, Steve. Really upset.
And a point you're making, John, you're saying like all this the carrier thing got a lot of press, and that's only 1,500 jobs, and just you're saying look at all the jobs that are potentially being taken away by the H-1B problem, and
exactly.
You think that has to be addressed. So now I will say, what I don't know, John, is if this is like something that needs legislation to fix or needs like executive action to fix. Now, if President Trump were here, he might say something like, well, there's so much going on right now, we haven't been able to do this. But it sounds like to me like you are upset about this and you really want President Trump to take action on this soon.
You know what, Steve? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take like a very, very pessimistic view of this right now, and I'm going to tell you how I feel. And I'm going to say that the president has kind of abandoned it. He didn't do anything. He allowed it to go through last week, and that's what. But I can tell you that Trump, none of his grandchildren or children will ever lose their job to an H-1B. However, he will build his wall to protect his children and grandchildren, because Kate Steinle could have easily have been a Trump. But no Trump will ever lose their job to an H-1B. And I'm sorry, so I'm a little bit pessimistic, I'm a little bit upset.
And I appreciate you calling in and sharing that, John. And the one thing I'll say is, it is still early, so we don't know exactly what he's going to be doing.
No.
In the administration?
The 85,000 went last week.
No, but what I'm saying though is it's early in his administration, so I wouldn't. It's not certain he won't do anything about it yet, because there's still.
No, he didn't. No, it's another year. So maybe you're saying maybe next year.
So you're saying it's a year. You're saying it's a yearly allotment. That's what they do once a year, and you wanted something to be done this year, and now nothing's going to be done. So the newest time is next year for something to be done on it. So, well, John, I appreciate you coming up and you calling in. I appreciate you bringing this issue up, because I know it is an important issue, and I got to go back and refresh my memory on it and read some more stuff on it. But I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm guessing you're upset about it, but I'm guessing there's other people upset about it as well. And I do know it's important to a lot of people. So we'll see what happens if anything is done about it. But I really appreciate you bringing it up and sharing it with our viewers.
Thanks for your time, Steve. I love your show.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks a lot. So H-1B visas, that is, it's helpful because there's so many issues out there that a lot of people are really interested in. And, when somebody's president, a lot of times things get focused on one thing on a time. So we had, right now it's Syria, that's a big thing, and North Korea. And before, remember, all the Nunes and Russia stuff, for like 2 weeks it was Nunes. The healthcare bill dominated the conversation. You have one thing that's really dominating. And yet there's all of this stuff out there that people want addressed. And I remember getting a lot of calls and viewer messages during when all that Nunes stuff were happening and the Russia stuff, and that was the Russia hearings were going on in Congress, and they were saying, there's all these different issues that we want to address that government isn't addressing, the Democrats aren't addressing, and that they're not letting President Trump address, and it's always been taking up on this stuff that is not so important to us. And John wants the administration to address the H-1B issue, as I know a lot of people do. But it's a good reminder to remember that not just the one or two issues they're focusing on in the news are the important issues to the country. So really appreciate when you guys call in and remind us here and remind all the viewers about the other issues that are affecting people and that are important. AVI or ABI? ABI. Abi, hi Abi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm just calling to respond to the previous caller.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, Abi? I didn't quite make it out.
I said I'm calling to respond to the previous caller.
Okay, about the H-1Bs. I'm glad. I like having dialogue here. So what do you? And by the way, Abi, where are you calling from today?
Yeah, I think he's impugning President Trump's character by saying that he's building the wall only because of his children. I mean, he has enough money, to build walls around his house. So he's not building the wall because of his children. The H-1B visa, there's a current law that he cannot just come in and change within 100 days. People should understand that. There's a law in the books that President Trump cannot just change overnight. It takes a process. People should be patient.
And this is a good point, Abi. You're saying if because this is a legal matter and because this, let's assume, I have to read up on it, but let's assume it require a law change to change the H-1B visa program. That's something, like you say, if it requires a law change, that could take a long time, and perhaps there was no way possible for him to get this through in his first 100 days, especially when he was working on other stuff.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
I understand. So you're still hopeful that President Trump might take action on this, or you're saying that look, just because he didn't do it now doesn't mean he's not going to get to it, and it might have been very hard, if not impossible, for him to do it now. Yeah.
It's the law. It's the law right now.
Yes.
It's the law. He just can't come in and issue an executive order that goes against current law.
Now, the one question I have about it, Abi, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, is with these laws, sometimes changing what's going on requires an actual change in the law, but sometimes the law, there could be a law that says the Department of Labor sets the number, and maybe you'd need some sort of Department of Labor regulation to get changed. But your general point is that this, whatever needs to get changed about this that has to get changed, could take a while to do, which I totally understand. You're saying if that's the case, we shouldn't totally blame him for not changing it so far. We should be patient and let him have a little time to actually be able to do this, so don't give up hope yet.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an important point to raise. I'm glad you called in and made that point, Abi. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Have a good one. So that was Abi making a good point that these things can take time, and I can't speak to this personally because what I would need to know is what exactly needs to get changed for the H-1B visa stuff to get changed. Is it a law change? Does it require Congress to do something? Is it a change is it an executive order that could be passed? If it's is it something that the Department of Labor could have done? I mean, if it's literally something that President Trump could write out an executive order and sign it and be done with it and change it right there, well then, you might. Then I think that's something where people could plausibly say, hey, he could have acted on this but didn't. Whereas if it's something that requires, say, Congress to change the law, that's going to take a much longer process. So I'm not sure about all this stuff about terms of what has to be changed for the H-1B program to be changed and how long that would take. So good questions. I love the dialogue between the viewers. Both you, John and Abi, both made very good points. So thank you for calling in. Much appreciated. Let me get back to your comments. I think some of you have written in the interim. Let's see here. This is from Ivan Romano. Ivan Romano writes, when I click onto the YouTube RSBN live stream of Sean Spicer, it does not appear even though I subscribe to RSBN. 7 other channels show up with the live stream, and 5 of them are channels that I don't subscribe to. Yeah, so I think what you're saying, Ivan, is you subscribe to RSBN, yet when you search Sean Spicer on YouTube, or just when you go to YouTube, you're getting recommendations for other channels that show political stuff but not right side. I've had that when I go on, when I go on my personal account, it'll suggest Spicer briefings to me, and it doesn't suggest right side, even though I'm subscribed to right side. So, it's. I'm not going to be. I won't be say it's definitely the case that they're messing with right side. I do think it's too bad though that. There's maybe it's just an accident, but I feel like maybe right side is getting a little shortchanged by the YouTube algorithm or whatever, just because I would think that if I subscribe to right side and Ivan subscribes to right side, it would suggest right side videos for us and not alternatives to right side. But it does this. We are looking into it actually, Ivan, so thanks for saying that. Also, you say, Ivan, I'm glad that Spicer mentioned Hitler. It was thought-provoking. Spicer said that gassing is akin to nukes. Then he said Hitler didn't use the gas and later clarified, but the truth is that Germany did show some restraint. On the other hand, Truman, who presided over America, used the nuclear bombs. We're expected to believe that the people of America were happy about that in 1945, but I wonder if that's true. Remember that people like Ezra Pound were attacked by the Truman regime for suggesting that he went too far. I don't think that Spicer made a controversial statement, but that's good. I do think that Spicer made a controversial statement, but that's good. Our role as moral leaders is controversial. It should be discussed. Also, Spicer said that images shown on TV moved Trump to act. That seems odd because we all know that TV news propagates false images. I hope that the president had a better reason to turn against Assad. Thank you, Ivan, for writing in a couple of points here. First of all, on the whole point about Spicer making the Hitler comment. So you do make, it's one point you make is you say that you like that he brought it up, the Hitler point, because you say it's arguable that it is, you believe that, while the Germans did some terrible things in World War II, they did restrain themselves in some ways. And you say, we did use the atomic bomb in World War II. We used a couple of them. And so it sounds like your general point is it's healthy to have this kind of discussion. I don't disagree with you. I do think it's healthy to have this kind of discussion. I guess the one problem with that Hitler comment, I think that might be the case, is one of our viewers said something like this, is the way it was stated could be interpreted as saying Assad is worse than Hitler, and I don't think that's what Sean Spicer meant, but the problem is if you put a statement out there that can be interpreted that way, then the media kind of runs with that, and all they talk about is that part of the statement and not the other parts. So that's a risk with making that kind of statement. But I do think it's healthy to talk about those kind of things. Also, I hadn't heard anybody say this before, and I think it's healthy to remember that we did use the atomic bombs in World War II. And, I wouldn't defend... I don't think it's good to use chemical weapons. I don't think it's used to any kind of chemical weapons. But it's it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're trying to judge other countries' use of things generally. I'm not talking about Assad specifically. I'm talking about countries in general. But just look at our own past and said we're the only country. The United States is the only country that's used nuclear weapons, and we used 2. We didn't just use 1. Now there's reasons we did it, but. It's just, my point is, when you're trying to judge other people's actions, you should put yourselves in their shoes and try to understand their motivations why, and maybe you'll ultimately decide you don't approve of their actions. But I think that's just a good historical context when trying to think about how we judge other countries for their use of weapons. So I agree with you. It's a good point. Also, now another point you made, Ivan, is you said there's been this story. So Spicer said that images shown on TV moved Trump to act. I've heard this comment before. Did Spicer say it yesterday too? I'm trying to remember. But I've heard this being said about President Trump, and you say that worries you a bit. You say it worries you a bit because you think because the TV news propagates false images. I heard somebody else say something like it worries them because should that be the reason why he's acting? Is that kind of impulsive just to act based on these images? So I will say it's possible that when if Spicer says, hey, the images caused him to act, that could be shorthand. He doesn't literally mean like President Trump saw one picture and then was like, we got to bomb Syria. By images, that could have been like an important part, but not. I'm sure he had intelligence that he read about and things he was told about what happened there. Also, it's possible it's something that President Trump maybe he had thought about how bad chemical weapons were, but something about seeing those images like pushed him a little bit over the edge. It's not like I think he thought chemical weapons were great before. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to interpret what it means when someone says the images seeing the images made President Trump react. There's a lot of ways we could interpret that. So how worrying that might be to you might depend on how you interpreted that comment. But thank you, Yvonne, for writing in. Appreciate it. We have here, Nurse D writes in, H-1B is something American companies want. Trump disappoints us in letting this slide. If he wanted to change it, he would have. So you, Nurse D, are someone who also would like to see a change with the H-1B program. Your feeling is that it's bad for American workers, although not necessarily for the companies who use it. So thank you, Nurse D, for writing in. Much appreciated. CJ Lane writes in, hey Steve, Major Garrett referenced that Secretary Kerry met Putin, but Tillerson only meets his underlings. Interesting, the irony. Major Garrett's obvious reference that Tillerson is not important to meet Putin, and Spicer was, last week we were in Russia's pocket. So you're saying, I think CJ Lane, the point you're getting at is, Major Garrett is pointing out how Tillerson can't meet Putin, but before we were hearing all this stuff from the media about how, we're like in with Putin totally and President Trump is doing Putin's bidding. So it seems weird that Putin isn't that doesn't seem to jibe with President Putin not meeting with Secretary of State Tillerson. And there's a more general point that we kept hearing for weeks about how President Trump was, secretly colluding with Russia, and yet it certainly doesn't seem like the action against Syria was, something that Russia would have wanted us to do. So that's I think it's a worthwhile thing to point out, CJ Lane. I didn't see, this is another one of these things where, again, when I'm out there in between the pre-show and the post-show while the briefing's going on, I have the briefing on, but I'm like keeping up with the news and doing some other stuff in the office, so I don't see every question, so I didn't see Major Garrett's exact question he asked. But thank you for writing in, CJ, and talking about it. So this is the post-show for the Sean Spicer press briefing. We are taking your comments, taking your questions about the briefing or other stuff in the news. We've had a lively discussion about the H-1B visa issue amongst you. So appreciate people writing in about that and calling in about that. If you'd like to call in, you can reach us at 202-470-0049, or on Twitter, you can write me at @Lookner, @LOOKNER, or you can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. I think I got some emails before, by the way, that I need to get to, and I apologize if I didn't get to them before. Let's see if this is, I thought I had some. Now I'm getting confused. What went wrong here? Are people emailing me at a different address? So I wonder, maybe I feel like this is odd. When I was at my desk, I thought there were some emails there sent to my right side account, and I'm not getting them on my iPad now. So if you emailed me before and I didn't get it right now, try emailing me again at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv, because I thought there were a couple of emails out there and I don't know why they're not. Maybe you emailed them to feedback@rsbn.tv. I don't get that on this iPad. I just get steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. So if I'm somehow not seeing your email, I apologize. I want to check real quick also and just see if there's any updates about what was going on in Germany. Okay. Wow, okay. So, as we said before, this is breaking news coming out of Europe. I don't know if it's going to be a big story in American media. I guess not, but there I'm sure it is a gigantic story. A important football team over there going to like the biggest European soccer tournament, the Champions League tournament, en route to their match today. several small explosions occurred near their bus, and one of their players, Mark Bartra, was injured and taken to the hospital, and the team confirms this. And the game that they were supposed to play, this Champions League match, which is a big important match there, was canceled, rescheduled for Wednesday. So just imagine if a bomb went off next to the bus of the Dallas Cowboys and an important player got hurt. It's equivalent of that. So not exactly equivalent, but you know how much press that would get here. And if that's a new strategy that's quite worrying, attacking this soft target of sports teams. So let me just check real quick and see if there's any more information on that. Well, that's the latest I have on that from BNO News. And there's something else here I wanted to read, if it is what I think it is. Let's see. So this is, Hallie Jackson tweeted this out. She said this is a second clarification from Sean Spicer on the Assad-Hitler comparison. Now, this might have been either after the press briefing or at the end of it. I was running in here at the end, so I didn't catch the end. But this Hallie Jackson said that Sean Spicer said, "In no way was I trying to lessen the horrendous nature of the Holocaust. However, I was trying to draw a contrast of the tactic of using airplanes to drop chemical weapons on innocent people." So that was a quote from Sean Spicer. I haven't been outside in the office because I'm in here, but I'm guessing the press is going nutty on the Hitler comment, and they will do so all afternoon because it gives them something to talk about on their 24-hour coverage that they think viewers will tune into. Okay, so we're going to be on the air for about 5 more minutes here. Let me just check here. If you want to write in and give any comments, give any last comments, email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv or direct message me on Twitter or at Lookner, at LOOKNER. Or you can call in, make one last call, 202-470-0049. Thank you for all the calls and comments so far. Big special thanks to all the interesting calls and comments we get on the H-1B program. I will read up on that later today. You guys are always good at letting me know what I need to read up on. Andrew Sova wrote in, ISIS is Hitler reincarnated. That is your view, Andrew. Thank you for writing in. And I also want to say thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat. Thank you to Jake for producing today. We're going to try, I think, to have the Defense Secretary supposed to be giving a briefing today at 3:30 Eastern. So, Jake, are we going to try to run that? Is that the plan? Let's see. I think we're going to try to run that. Yes, so we will tweet out about that exactly, but we're going to try to run with that. So more programming for you today. Also tonight you can watch America First with Nick Fuentes at 8 p.m. America First with Nick Fuentes, and at 9 p.m. on right side is the Wayne Dupree Show. You can watch that. What else am I trying to remember here? So thank you to the moderators for moderating, as usual. Apologies, by the way, if during the briefing you're having some issues watching it. There seem to be some YouTube issues on, because on my computer in the office, I couldn't get the right side feed of Spicer, but I also, even the White House feed of Spicer on YouTube wasn't coming through, but yet on another computer it was working, so there might have been some YouTube issues. It wasn't, I don't believe it was on our end. I think it was on some other end, maybe the YouTube end, but it wasn't on our end. We were getting the signal out fine, but some people weren't getting it on their computer, including me. And also, if you would like to donate and help us out, we'd very much appreciate it, because your donations help us stay on the air. And they don't just help us stay and allow us to stay on the air. Without your donations, we couldn't bring you coverage. Even small donations. You might think, oh, this donation is too small, it's not going to help you. No, it does help us. So if you enjoy our programming and you want to help out, you can either, to donate, click on the $sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat next to the programming. Click on the $sign. You can donate that way. Or go to rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. And if you'd like to maybe make a recurring donation like once a month and get something for it, you can check out our Patreon site, www.patreon.com/rsbn. It's a new site where we offer things in return for donations. So thank you for everybody who's donated so far on Patreon and elsewhere. Very much appreciated. And okay, we're going to have maybe 2 minutes left here. I want to just see if there's anything else. Yeah, BBC News is reporting this story about the German soccer team's bus, an explosion next to it, and one player injured. So I'll be interested in seeing how much the American mainstream media covers this story. And yes, we will be back. The plan is to be back in about an hour and a half I won't be here. I'll be in the news. I'll be in the office, but we won't do a pre-show for this. But we will bring you the Defense Department briefing that's coming up. Secretary of Defense briefing. I think it's on Syria. Don't hold me 100% to that. But I saw a report. It's going to be on Syria. But a Defense Secretary briefing coming up at 3:30. Look forward to bringing that to you. But for now, thanks for joining us for our coverage of Sean Spicer's press briefing. We'll cover it tomorrow. If he does a press briefing tomorrow, we'll cover it every day he does a press briefing. For now, thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great day, and join us in a little bit for the Defense Secretary's briefing. We'll see you later.